Hello, friend. How are you today? I want to share something with you, something that happened to someone just like us, someone who thought they knew everything about the person they loved most in this world. You know that feeling when someone you've always trusted starts slipping away? When the person who used to be your anchor suddenly feels like a stranger living in your own home? When every night you watch them disappear into the darkness, and every morning you see a little less of who they used to be? Sometimes we think we're seeing betrayal when we're actually witnessing the deepest kind of love. Sometimes the people who seem furthest away are the ones holding us closest to their hearts. This is a story about secrets that break us and truths that rebuild us, about a son who thought his father had stopped caring, only to discover that caring was all his father had ever done. Take my hand, friend. Let's walk through this together, because by the end of this journey, you might just see the quiet heroes in your own life a little differently. Meet Jake Morrison, 23 years old, fresh out of college, and carrying dreams that feel heavier than they used to. Every morning, Jake wakes up in the same bedroom he's had since he was 12. The walls still hold faded posters of his favorite bands, reminders of simpler times when his biggest worry was making it to class on time. He brushes his teeth at the same sink where his father taught him to shave, looks in the same mirror that once reflected a boy who thought his dad could fix anything. Jake's the kind of guy people remember fondly from school. Not the star athlete, not the class president, but the one who helped you with your homework when you were struggling, the one who listened when others were too busy talking. His friends would tell you he's loyal, thoughtful, maybe a little too hard on himself sometimes. He works at a local marketing firm now. Nothing glamorous, but it pays the bills. Or at least he thought it did. During lunch breaks, he sits in his car and calls his college friends, listening to their stories about new cities and fresh starts, wondering why he chose to stay home while everyone else moved on. But here's what people don't see when they look at Jake. Behind those patient eyes lives a growing weight of confusion and disappointment. Every evening, he sits at the dinner table across from a man who used to be his hero, watching him become more of a stranger with each passing day. Jake remembers when his father's smile could light up a room. Now, that same man barely makes eye contact, lost in thoughts Jake can't begin to understand. And every night, like clockwork, Jake watches the most important person in his life slip away into the darkness, leaving him alone with the questions that nobody seems willing to answer. Jake's mornings always start the same way. 6:30 sharp, the alarm pulls him from dreams he can never quite remember. He reaches for his phone first thing, scrolling through messages from friends in different time zones, living different lives. Then comes the ritual: shower, coffee, and that moment of hope that maybe today his father will still be at the kitchen table when he comes downstairs. Most mornings, he is. David Morrison, 52 years old, already dressed in his work clothes, reading the news on his tablet with the same quiet intensity he's had for as long as Jake can remember. They exchange the usual pleasantries. Sleep well? Weather looks decent today. Small talk that used to feel comfortable but now carries an invisible weight. Neither of them acknowledges. Jake drives the same route to work every day. Past the high school where he played varsity soccer, past the diner where he had his first job, past all the landmarks of a life that stayed put while the rest of the world kept moving. He knows every pothole, every traffic light, every face behind the counter at the coffee shop where he stops for his usual medium roast, no sugar, splash of cream. At Morrison and Associates Marketing, Jake has earned a reputation as the reliable one. He's the guy who stays late to finish projects, who remembers everyone's birthdays, who brings donuts on Fridays without being asked. His coworkers like him, really like him. Sarah from accounting always saves him a seat at lunch. Mike from creative asks his opinion on campaigns, even though Jake's technically junior to him. But beneath the surface of this comfortable routine, something is shifting. Jake finds himself checking his watch more often during the day, wondering what his father is doing, where his mind goes during those long silences at breakfast. He catches himself staring out his office window, not at the skyline, but at his own reflection, searching for answers to questions he hasn't learned how to ask yet. Evenings are when the unease grows strongest. Jake comes home to find dinner already prepared. His father has always been the cook in their family. They eat together, mostly in silence. the television filling the spaces where conversation used to live. His father seems distracted, distant, like he's already somewhere else, even though he's sitting right there. And then, every night, around 10, comes the moment Jake has learned to dread. The sound of keys jingling, the soft click of the front door, and the quiet hum of his father's car pulling out of the driveway. Jake tells himself it's work, late meetings, client emergencies, the demands of running your own business. But deep down, in that place where intuition lives, he knows something else is happening, something his father doesn't want him to see. It starts with small things. A phone call that ends abruptly when Jake walks into the room. His father's jacket smelling like perfume. Not his mother's perfume. She's been gone 3 years now. But something floral and unfamiliar. Text messages that make David's face change, soften in a way Jake hasn't seen since before Mom passed away. Jake tries to push the thoughts away at first. Tells himself he's being paranoid, that grief makes people imagine things that aren't there. But doubt has a way of growing in the dark spaces of your mind, feeding on every unexplained moment until it becomes impossible to ignore. The breaking point comes on a Tuesday night in October. Jake is in his room, trying to focus on a project proposal that's due the next morning, when he hears his father's voice through the thin walls. Soft, gentle, almost tender. The way he used to talk to Jake's mother when he thought no one was listening. "I know this is hard," his father whispers into the phone, "but I need you to understand. I can't keep doing this much longer." Jake's heart stops. The words hit him like a physical blow, each syllable confirming his worst fears. He presses his ear against the wall, his hand shaking as he strains to hear more. "I think about you every day," David continues. "Every single day. But this situation, it's tearing me apart." The conversation ends, and Jake sits in the darkness of his room, feeling like the ground beneath him has just crumbled away. This is it. This is the moment when everything he thought he knew about his father, about their life together, about the man who raised him, turns to dust. The rage comes first, hot, consuming, righteous anger at the betrayal. How could his father do this? How could he dishonor Jake's mother's memory? How could he be so selfish, so careless with the family they'd built together? But then comes something worse than anger. The crushing weight of realization that he's been living a lie. That every morning conversation, every shared dinner, every moment of what felt like normalcy has been built on deception. Jake feels like he's drowning in his own home, suffocating on the secrets that fill the air between them. Sleep becomes impossible. Jake lies awake, night after night, listening to his father's car pull out of the driveway, imagining where he's going, who he's with, what promises he's making to someone else. The boy who once thought his father was a hero now sees him as a stranger wearing a familiar face. And the worst part? Jake realizes he doesn't even know how to confront him, because asking the question means hearing the answer, and hearing the answer means watching the last piece of his family fall apart forever. Jake stops eating dinner with his father. He can't sit across from him anymore, can't pretend that everything is normal when his world is quietly falling apart. Instead, he takes his plate to his room, closing the door on the uncomfortable silence that has become their new language. For 3 weeks, Jake becomes a ghost in his own home. He leaves for work before his father wakes up, comes home after he's already gone for the night. They communicate through notes left on the kitchen counter, reminders about bills, grocery lists, the hollow formalities of two people who used to share everything. On a Saturday afternoon, when the loneliness becomes too heavy to carry alone, Jake finds himself in his father's study. It's a room he hasn't entered in months, maybe years. The walls are lined with photo albums, certificates, memories of a life that suddenly feels foreign to him. He picks up a frame from the desk, a picture of his parents on their wedding day. His mother's smile is radiant, his father's eyes full of promise and love. Jake stares at the image until it blurs, trying to reconcile the man in the photograph with the stranger living down the hall. Then he sees it, tucked between the pages of an old photo album, a letter in his father's handwriting. Jake's hands tremble as he unfolds it, expecting to find evidence of betrayal, proof of the affair that's been eating him alive. But the words on the page aren't what he expected. They're not love letters to another woman. They're fragments of thoughts, desperate prayers written in the middle of sleepless nights. I don't know how to tell him. One line reads, "How do you explain to your son that his future is costing you your sleep? That his dreams are heavier than your own?" Jake's breath catches. The handwriting becomes harder to read, as if written in moments of exhaustion or despair. "Every night I drive through the city, I think about the boy who used to wait up for me to come home from work. Now he can't even look at me, and I don't know how to bridge the distance between us." The letter falls from Jake's hands. He sits in his father's chair, surrounded by memories of better times, feeling the weight of his own assumptions crushing down on him. He's been so sure, so certain of his father's betrayal, that he never considered he might be wrong. In the silence of that room, Jake realizes something that breaks his heart all over again. He's been so focused on what he thought his father was hiding that he never stopped to ask why he might be hiding it. Love, he's learning, sometimes wears the mask of secrecy not to hurt, but to protect. That night, Jake can't sleep. The fragments of his father's letter echo in his mind, each word reshaping everything he thought he understood. At 2 a.m, he makes a decision that will change everything. He's going to follow his father. Jake waits by his bedroom window, watching the driveway like he's done so many nights before. But this time, when his father's car pulls away, Jake slips out the back door and into his own car, keeping his distance, his heart pounding with a mixture of fear and determination. The drive takes them through parts of the city Jake rarely sees. Quiet neighborhoods, empty office buildings, streets that look different in the darkness. His father's car moves with purpose, like this journey has been made 1,000 times before. Then something unexpected happens. Instead of pulling into a hotel parking lot or stopping at another house, his father's car turns into the emergency entrance of St. Mary's Hospital. Jake parks across the street, confusion washing over him as he watches his father walk toward a row of white ambulances. And then Jake sees it, his father pulling on a uniform, a badge, a radio, moving with the quiet efficiency of someone who belongs here, who has done this before, who is expected. The realization hits Jake like a wave. His father isn't having an affair. He's working. A second job. Night shifts that Jake never knew existed. Jake sits in his car, watching his father disappear into the ambulance bay, and feels something shift inside his chest. All those nights, he thought his father was betraying their family. He was actually saving other families. All those mornings when David looked exhausted, he had been carrying other people's emergencies on his shoulders, while Jake slept safely in his bed. In that moment, sitting in the darkness outside the hospital, Jake remembers something his mother used to say when he was young. Sometimes the greatest acts of love happen in silence, when no one is watching, when no one will ever know. She was right. Love had been happening in silence all along. Jake just hadn't known where to look. The conversation doesn't happen immediately. Jake drives home that night with his father's secret heavy in his chest, knowing that some truths need time to settle before they can be spoken. 3 days pass before Jake finds the courage to break the silence. He's in the kitchen making coffee when his father comes downstairs, looking tired but trying to smile the way he always does. This time, Jake doesn't look away. "Dad," he says quietly, "we need to talk." The words that follow aren't easy ones. They're filled with tears, apologies, and explanations that have been waiting months to be heard. Jake learns about the debt that's been crushing their family. Debt that Jake himself created with college loans and credit cards he'd been careless with. Money he thought came from savings actually came from his father's sleepless nights and aching bones. David had taken the ambulance job to protect Jake from the weight of guilt, to handle the burden alone rather than watch his son carry it. Every night he'd driven through the city, responding to emergencies, earning money to pay for Jake's future while Jake slept, unknowing and safe. "Why didn't you tell me?" Jake asks through tears. "Because," his father says, his voice barely a whisper, "I didn't want you to feel like your dreams were a burden. They're not. They never were. The healing that follows isn't immediate or perfect, but it's real." Jake takes on 2 part-time jobs, insisting on helping with the debt despite his father's protests. Their morning conversations slowly return, tentative at first, then warmer, filled with honesty they'd forgotten how to share. Some evenings, Jake waits up for his father to come home from his ambulance shifts, not to confront him, but to be there when he walks through the door, to make sure he knows he's not carrying the weight alone anymore. They learn to talk about the hard things, money, responsibility, the future they're building together instead of apart. Jake discovers that his father isn't just his hero because of his strength, but because of his willingness to be vulnerable when love demands it. Trust, Jake realizes, isn't something you rebuild overnight. It's something you tend to, day by day, conversation by conversation, choice by choice. 6 months later, Jake still waits up sometimes when his father works the night shift. Not out of suspicion, but out of love. He's learned that presence isn't always about being in the same room. Sometimes it's about being there when someone comes home, tired and carrying the weight of other people's emergencies. David doesn't work as many night shifts anymore. Together, they've managed to reduce the debt, to share the burden that once felt impossible to carry alone. But more than that, they've learned to share the smaller things too. Morning coffee, evening news, the comfortable silence that comes when two people truly know each other. Jake looks at his father differently now. Not as the perfect hero he once imagined, but as something more valuable. A human being who chose love even when it was exhausting, who carried burdens in silence, not out of pride, but out of protection. Sometimes the people closest to us are fighting battles we can't see. That parent who seems distracted, that partner who's been distant, that friend who's been quiet lately. They might be carrying your world on their shoulders while you sleep peacefully at night. We live in a time when it's easy to assume the worst about people's intentions. When someone changes, when they become distant or secretive, our minds often jump to betrayal, to selfishness, to all the ways they might be failing us. But Jake's story reminds us that love often wears 1,000 different masks. The next time someone you care about seems to be pulling away, before you let suspicion take root in your heart, ask yourself this: what if they're not running away from you, but running towards something that will help you? What if their distance is actually the deepest form of presence they know how to give? Take a moment today to really see the people in your life. Look beyond the surface, beyond your assumptions, beyond your fears, because sometimes the greatest love stories are written in the spaces between what we see and what we don't understand. And maybe, just maybe, you'll discover that you've been surrounded by heroes all along.